Thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedules. I know I can attest how difficult it is to find an hour to sit down behind the computer in many of our roles. So appreciate you taking the time to be here today and listening to the presentation that Shannon has. And this will be the first time that I get to listen in on the presentation as well. So we're really excited to share with all of you the exciting work that's happening behind the chairs of regional chairs, but more at a larger scale, what's happening in solid waste in the province. So the regional chairs is really I guess representation from across the province. We have 7 regions. I represent Region 1, based in CBRM, but cover all of Cape Breton Island. Really, we come together every month or 6 weeks or so. We collaborate on different initiatives across the province as it relates to solid waste. Things like extended producer responsibility, which you're going to hear about today, when it comes to best practices in waste collection or disposal practices, all of those things. It's a shared table where councillors from across the councillor, wardens, mayors, really it's whoever the region allocates to sit on the committee. And we also have the great pleasure of sitting with a lot of our staff from across the province who represent their regions as well. And they share the expertise, the wisdom, the knowledge. They do the day-to-day in the world of solid waste. I would say they are the experts in the field, and we take direction as best we can as elected officials, of course. So then we sort of break down from regional chairs and we get into the priorities group, which is a really I guess the sort of the working group of the regional chairs committee. So myself as chair of regional chairs sit on that. We also have another councillor who sits on the committee on the group, Councillor Mancini from Dartmouth. And then we have some managers who from different regions across the province who sit with us as well. And I'm sure I'm missing others on there, Shannon, but I'll let you fill in the blanks as the expert here in the room. So without further ado, I hope that today's presentation is worth your time, and you've got questions at the end of it. This is an exciting time for us in regional chairs, and this work long precedes my tenure on council. So I'll turn the floor over to Shannon and let her share her presentation. And please feel free to ask questions. If we don't know the answer, I'm sure we can find it for you. But I think between Shannon, Andrew, and Andrea, if those 3 don't know the answers, there's a good chance nobody does. So I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Let's take 1 second here and get my screen going so that everyone can see my slides. I guess I would add, as far as the priorities committee group goes, we're really fortunate that we're able to have representation on that committee from not only our municipalities. We have a couple groups. We have our elected officials represented by Councillors McDonald and Councillor Mancini. We have managers and directors represented. So Andrea Trask, who's the manager in East Hants, and Gus Green, who's the general manager of Waste Check. Andrew Garrett and myself are what we refer to as regional coordinators. So we work within our respective areas to help answer questions and share information among all of the different stakeholders in our groups. But we also have representatives from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, Municipal Affairs, NSFM, and Divert Nova Scotia. So it's really a unique working group that we have some great conversations, a lot of sharing of information, and we really feel that collaboration and partnership has served us very well as we've been through this journey in EPR. So I guess I want us to start just quickly by saying thank you to NSFM for facilitating this session and the session that we're going to have next week. We're really hoping to kind of give some background for anyone who may not be as familiar with EPR, kind of talk about how we got to where we are today, what's happening at the moment, and kind of what we see in the future and what this all means for municipalities. So to recap what EPR is, extended producer responsibility is essentially a regulation that makes manufacturers responsible for the products that they're bringing into the marketplace. So the type of EPR that we're talking about here is around packaging, paper products, and packaging-like products. So essentially, these are things that we're putting out for our curbside recycling in our blue bags. When we talk about packaging-like products, some packaging that you might buy food in at the grocery store could be a pie plate, for example. When we talk about packaging-like products, the equivalent for a pie plate would be if you buy a package of pie plates to make pie at home, that would be also included, even though it doesn't come already with a consumable product in it. So one of the concepts in EPR is that, in theory, it will make manufacturers more responsible, not only for the operations, collections, processing, and marketing of that recyclable material, but they'll also look at ways to make their packaging more efficient, more recyclable, maybe even look at ways that they can reduce the packaging in the first place. So I believe the first formal consultation that we had between municipalities and the province on EPR may have been back 2014 or earlier. We've kind of been on a path since then. There have been times when we thought EPR regulations were imminent and it didn't happen. But finally, in August of 2023, they were announced. This was all part of the current provincial government's mandates around the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act, implementing EPR as a way to further the circular economy and reach our climate change and waste reduction goals. Recognizing that costs, fluctuate based on things around like markets for recyclable materials and other operational costs. It is estimated that this EPR program could save municipalities across the province between $20 and $25 million. So it is a significant impact to us, and one that we've, as I've mentioned, been waiting for quite some time. So through our provincial regional chairs committee and our provincial municipal priorities working group, we have been fortunate to be able to work closely with the staff at Nova Scotia Environment as they've been developing these regulations. We've had a strong history of consultation. We have actually been able to reach consensus on a lot of points that were up for discussion around EPR with municipalities across the province. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's not often that every municipality in Nova Scotia raises their hand and says, yes, we all agree that this is the way forward, and this is something that's a priority for us. The other thing that being part of this committee has allowed us to do is to speak to our municipal counterparts across the province. So we've seen provinces like British Columbia, Ontario, and more recently New Brunswick take the steps towards this EPR regulation. We're looking at how they're implementing, how things are going, and we've been able to speak to staff as well as subject matter experts in those provinces to gain a lot of insight. We've been doing our homework, but we do find that every time we meet or talk to someone new, we're learning more information every day. So it's certainly an evolving process, but one that we're committed to sharing that information with everyone. So as we start talking about the regulations, there are some key players involved that it's important to understand what their role is. So the producers are the actual manufacturers of the products. They are brand owners, they are importers of products, or they could be the retailer of different packaging materials. So this is all laid out within the regulations, and when it comes down to it, the administrator, who I'll discuss in a moment, will be kind of the final say on whether a producer is obligated to be part of the program or not. Now, as you can imagine, there are hundreds and thousands, or likely thousands, of producers out there. So what the regulations allow is for those producers to identify a producer responsibility organization. So this is a not-for-profit organization that would take a look at all of the material that's in the system and come up with a plan on how that material is going to be collected, processed, and marketed. And they're doing that on behalf of the producers. The producers would pay a fee into that organization to allow for the management of that material. Excuse me. One example, very common and high profile, I guess, pro, as we call them, would be circular materials. They are currently the primary producer responsibility organization in Ontario and New Brunswick, and they have indicated that they will be entering the EPR program in Nova Scotia. I'm not sure of the percentage within Ontario or New Brunswick, but I believe that they are very close to representing 100% of all of the producers who are obligated under those programs. Another important player in this regulation, obviously, is the provincial government, who sets the regulations. They set the targets. How much of the material that's coming into the province is the pro responsible for capturing and diverting? Another key role in this is what we call the administrator. So in Nova Scotia, the provincial government has identified Divert Nova Scotia as being the administrator of the producer of the EPR program. So what Divert Nova Scotia will be doing is managing the registration of municipalities, the registration of producers, and all the data collection that's required as part of that. They will oversee compliance as well as annual reporting from the producer organization to the province. So essentially, they are a registration and enforcement body who will be overseeing these regulations. And then, of course, we have municipalities and regions. We have a very long and successful history of managing blue bag materials in our curbside collection programs. We run facilities, we manage these programs, and you know, I would say that we do it quite well. So our role in this will be to work with the producer organizations and with Divert Nova Scotia to establish what this program is going to look like going forward. We will have a role likely in collecting material and likely doing some education and administration of the curbside collection programs as well. So as far as dates and deadlines that have been identified in the regulations, January 1st is going to be an important date for municipalities, as this is the date that we'll have to register with Divert Nova Scotia. When I get to talking about these in more detail, I'm actually going to leave that one until the end, just so it's fresh in everyone's mind before we get into answering any questions. But January 1st is also the deadline by which producers must select a producer responsibility organization. So they will be in the process of registering with Divert Nova Scotia to identify them. The October 1st, 2024, the pro has to consult with every municipality in the province, and by October 1st of next year, they have to submit what's called a readiness report to divert. So they have to identify how they're going to collect material, how they're going to process it, how they're going to work towards reaching their targets. And the big date, December 1st, 2025, that is the date that we're looking at full EPR for PPP implementation. So the expectation is that by that date, every municipality in the province will be working with the pro to deliver this service. You know, that date may seem far away, it may seem close. Regardless of how you look at it, it is going to come fast. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done between now and then to have these programs fully up and running. So talking a little bit about producer determination. So a lot of the producers who will be obligated under this program may not be present in Nova Scotia. They may be importing material to our province, but there will be some producers who are based in Nova Scotia. What the regulations allow for is an exemption to assist small businesses. So what we're looking at is businesses and organizations who have a gross annual revenue of less than $1 million in Nova Scotia, or who generate less than 1 ton of printed paper or packaging material in the province. So regardless of that target, even businesses who fall under that threshold will be required to do some tracking and record keeping, just to continue to demonstrate that they meet that exemption criteria. So Divert Nova Scotia and Circular Materials will be great resources for those types of businesses. If within your municipalities you have any businesses or business associations who are asking about this, it would be very wise to refer them to either of those organizations. Another thing within the regulations that it's important to kind of note is that municipalities and other orders of government can also be deemed as a producer. So if you take a look at the amount of paper that you're putting out, like tax bills, recreation pamphlets, newsletters, bulletins, it is possible that some municipalities could exceed that 1 ton threshold. And so that's just something that we have to kind of keep aware, just to kind of keep in the back of our minds, given the relatively small impact that this material would have on the overall system. We don't expect that it's going to be something that we have to act on right out of the gate. But as I said, we just want to keep this in mind, that that we as municipalities can be considered as a producer under those definitions. So as I mentioned before, by October of next year, 2024, the Pro must have consulted with every municipality in the province, and they have to submit a readiness report to Divert Nova Scotia. That's going to outline how they consulted with municipalities, what feedback they received, how they addressed that feedback. And they have to give a description of the actions that they are going to take to ensure the material is appropriately managed, that the report and record keeping systems are adequate and can provide the information that Divert Nova Scotia is going to ask for. And they have to outline how they're going to promote and educate the services that are going to be provided to the residents of Nova Scotia. As part of the consultation, the Pro will ask and has already, and Circular Materials has already asked for a list of different types of data from municipalities. So this ranges from things like how many households we're collecting from. They're asking about costs that we incur for our services, the amount of tonnage that we collect. And this is all designed to help prepare for negotiations that we'll enter into with the Pro on how these services are going to be delivered. So going back to the January 1st deadline that municipalities are looking at, the big decision that's going to be made by municipalities by January 1st is whether we are going to opt in or opt out. So opting out of EPR means that you would continue to collect material curbside in your Blue Bag program. You would bear that cost yourself, and you would be responsible for processing and marketing that material. You wouldn't receive any compensation from the producer responsibility organizations or the producers to support that program. The feedback that we've heard over the last few years from municipalities is that this is likely not something that that many are considering, but as we get closer to that deadline, it is going to be a conversation that that will come up, and in order to make that decision. If we opt into EPR, there are a couple of scenarios and ways that can look. Essentially, though, once you opt into EPR, you would technically not be responsible for providing collection services related to your curbside Blue Bag program. The difference in that, or the option in that, is that municipalities could be contracted by the pro to provide those collection, processing, and education services. So as I mentioned, the opt-out, that's, you may have heard the term first right of refusal. So, that's what we mean by first right of refusal. You can say, no, we don't want to be part of this program. We want to continue as we have, and just manage our systems ourselves. So one thing that municipalities may choose to do, because there are targets province-wide for the percentage of material that has to be collected, municipalities can choose to share their data that would assist the producers in reaching their targets. So, even though you wouldn't be part of the program or benefiting financially from the program, you could still have your efforts recognized in that way. So as I noted, opting in means that technically you would not be responsible for providing services for collection. You could say to the pro, we don't want to be part of this, and that would mean that the pro would have to contract collection services in your municipality. They would generally take full ownership of the service once that report is approved. The thing that we need to note and keep in mind is that there are a lot of municipalities in the province who provide collection services to apartment buildings, schools, and some businesses. So under the EPR regulations, anything that's residential, so those apartment buildings, condos, as well as schools and seasonal residences, they are actually captured under that EPR program. So the pro and the producers would be responsible for collecting from those locations. What is not included under the regulations would be any businesses. So if you have non-residential businesses that you're collecting from curbside, you will have to look at how those services would be maintained and how those businesses would continue to receive service. So as we start talking to the pros about what this collection service is going to look like, the municipality may work with the pro to continue in the collection or the processing of the blue bag materials. So at this point, essentially, municipalities would become a service provider for the pro. And we would have to enter into negotiations with the pro regarding the service of the nature of the service, what the standards are going to be, and what the remuneration is going to be that the pro would pay to municipalities. So just as we have expectations and conditions on contracts that we have with private hauling companies, for example, that collect our curbside material, pros will have those same kinds of expectations of us. As I mentioned earlier in my in the presentation, municipalities in Nova Scotia have been doing this for a long time. We've been collecting garbage, recycling green carts for a long time, and I have every confidence that we would continue to provide a top level and efficient service under this program. The other part of this is around processing. So some municipalities have their own recycling facilities. It's our observation from other provinces that the pro is going to want to leverage as much existing infrastructure as possible. They don't want to go out and build new buildings. They don't want to reinvent the wheel. They want to be efficient with with the money that they're putting into the program. So it's very likely that the producer responsibility organization will talk to municipalities about their existing infrastructure, whether they can repurpose it. So there may be opportunities, for example, to lease a recycling facility to the pro, or you may even go even further and say, we've been processing this material, so we're going to continue to do that. So those are all things that as we go through the consultation phase over the next year, we will be discussing with the pro. As far as the contract negotiations go, the contracts would be negotiated on a one-on-one basis. What we've seen in other provinces is that the pro will release a standard form of contract, so commercial terms essentially, and each municipality who's providing any type of service to the pro for collection or processing, for example, would be required to have that negotiation with the pro. So that's likely going to involve retaining legal services or using your in-house legal teams. You also have the subject matter experts, as we talked about the Regional Chairs Committee and the Priorities Working Group and our regional coordinators and our managers and directors group. Those subject matter experts are all there to advise and to guide us through the process. Through these contracts, the pro will decide what their procurement process will be, and ultimately they will decide who will provide processing services. So, you could go through negotiations and they may decide that for whatever reason, it may not work out. It may not be in line with what their expectations are for the program. So, it would, they may decide to go through another procurement process to establish those services and who's going to provide them. Another thing that I'm sure everyone is very well aware of is the fantastic solid waste education programs that we have across the province that are delivered by our municipalities and our regions, that's supported by Divert Nova Scotia. So since producers will now be responsible for providing information and education to residents, we will be looking at how municipalities can continue with the programs that we have and what we're doing to kind of continue integrating that into the other solid waste education and that we're already doing out there. So what we've seen in other provinces is that the pros have negotiated with municipalities on a rate of what they would pay in order to continue that. Additionally, municipalities will always have the option to continue to engage their own waste reduction education services as we're doing now, because as we know, we have more streams than just recycling. We're talking about organics, we're talking about waste reduction, we're talking about all of those things. So it's going to be important to kind of integrate all of that and make sure that everyone's kind of working together. The really cool thing that we often mention about EPR is that at some point in the next 2 years, we're going to see a province-wide recycling program. So what goes in the blue bag in Yarmouth or Halifax or Cumberland or Cape Breton is going to be the same all across the province. So we really think that that's going to help further, our waste diversion message and really help promote, how we handle our waste and make things easier for people who travel across the province. So talking about next steps, we have this January 1st, 2024 deadline by which we have to raise our hands and say that we're going to opt in or opt out. Circular Materials has already provided a list for us of the type of data that they're looking for. Jeff McCallum is the former CEO of Divert Nova Scotia, and he's currently the managing director of Circular Materials Atlantic, and he presented to our Regional Chairs Committee on Friday. And, so we were really pleased to get that information. We knew it was coming, so staff have actually been working over the last couple months starting to gather that information. So hopefully that means we're a little bit ahead of the game. As we move forward towards implementation, staff are going to continue to consult with Divert Nova Scotia, with the province, and with Circular Materials or any other pros who happen to come forward to really stay ahead of the game and to make sure that we're moving this program forward as best we can. Kind of the last, the last tip that I would leave for all of you is that, I know there are a lot of things going on in municipalities. We have a lot of really high profile issues that we're dealing with, from housing to, floods and fires and all of those things. But I would really encourage you all to stay informed and stay engaged. If you have questions about EPR, We have our list of regional contacts here, ranging from our regional coordinators as well as our elected chairs. So, you know, please reach out and ask these folks questions, because they really are the experts in this, and want to do everything we can to make this program successful for all municipalities across Nova Scotia. So that concludes my presentation.